Matt Cooke, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing lovely. How about yourself?
I'm doing very well, thank you, sir. Very well indeed. I'm looking forward to the chat today. Been looking forward to this for a while.
Believe it or not, you're the first marketing person on the podcast. So I'm going to count how many times you say AI.
I can't believe that you've not ever had any marketing people, because I know that there's a lot of people out there like me that kind of hide marketing behind their job titles, right? So externally, when I'm out there talking, I'm a cybersecurity strategist, but internally within the organization, I'm marketing. And you found out that I was marketing on LinkedIn, so I've been outed. That's how it goes.
And I'm just kidding. I mean, I see you've been a consultant pretty much your whole life, so that's a very interesting career path move.
My background is actually I was hands-on IT. I used to run an IT team. I used to do a lot of the work myself, and then from there I kind of evolved through a whole bunch of different vendors, before finding my way to Proofpoint. And I guess that's the experience that I bring. Hopefully both sides of the fence, right? I can see it from, hey, we're a vendor and we need to sell products, to, hey, actually, we're out there trying to defend our organizations against some bad threats, and we need to actually make a bit of a difference. So it's a balance. It's about keeping it real.
Yeah. And hey, I'm just giving you shit. I saw that you came from the technical side, so if you were just marketing your whole life, I wouldn't make that joke.
I know, no, exactly.
And it'd be the pot calling the kettle black. Like I'm sales, and I'm a sales guy working with marketing, so I'm probably the worst of anybody.
Oh, yeah. Well, there you go. We're both imposters.
Wolf in sheep clothing, right? But hey, as you know, we have a tendency in security to kind of hop on like the new and cool bandwagon, right? So these days. One thing I hear a lot about in these walls, or when a lot of stuff we're doing incident response on, right, is internet-facing appliances, VPN gateways. I would almost think that email security is kind of over a thing of the past. We solved that. I would assume that's not the case.
That would be great if we did, though, wouldn't it?
Right. What's the status of email security in 2024 as of the July 2024?
Do you know, it's constantly evolving, and you're right, because you look at it from the outside and you think, hey, email security, that was done, right? We used to buy an appliance and stick there, and it used to do all that for us. We filtered everything, and then all of a sudden we went cloud, and we went, I don't know, maybe most of us went Office 365 and Google Workspace, whatever it happens to be, and they kind of did the email thing for us. And so we all thought that problem was done. But the reality is it hasn't, because if you think from a cyber criminal's perspective, the easiest thing for me is actually to get you to do bad stuff for me, right? Because if I've got to sit there and try and exploit a zero day and try and hack into a system, whatever I've got to do, that involves a lot of work. And if I'm burning those 0 days or burning the use of those vulnerabilities, that's a challenge that's really expensive for me. What's really easy for me is to effectively be a grifter, is to turn around and try and con you into doing stuff. And that hasn't changed, because that can scale, right? If I can get you to click on a link, if I can get you to give me information, if I can get you to send me money, then I'm achieving. I'm out there. I'm winning as a cyber criminal. And so the way I communicate with you, well, it's ubiquitous, right? It's email. We've all been doing it, and so the job of the cyber criminal is actually just to evade those defenses. And so the job of email security, and email security as a platform, really, rather than just thinking of it as a single box, it's actually kind of much bigger than that now. Is to try and stay ahead of that, is to try and spot some of those social engineering techniques, not just like, hey, it's a bit of malware, it's a virus, whatever it is. It's actually someone trying to trick you into doing something. That's a much harder equation to solve, for sure.
Right. So the email is still in a threat vector that's increasing, or what do the numbers look like there?
Yeah, I mean, it is. And you only have to look at all the standard reports. I think, Verizon came out, was it a month or two ago, with their data breach report, and about 76% of all incidents had some kind of human element involved in them. Because for the reasons that we just explained, right? You're the one that's being targeted rather than anyone else. It's not systems per se, it's just much easier to target you as an individual. So those risks are kind of increasing. And then similarly, you throw in the mix the types of risk. Clearly, if I compromise an account, that could easily lead to ransomware. We know that's a big challenge. We don't need to kind of go and chew over that one again. But we call this thing in the industry business email compromise, which is more like this imposter fraud, right? And me trying to trick you into sending money. that is massively on the rise. Unfortunately, that's one of the biggest areas where companies are losing money, because it's just simple social engineering, and often actually involves, accounts that have been taken over. So I guess that those are the reasons, I guess, that the market has evolved. And everyone thought, that actually what we had was good enough, and actually now everyone's realizing, no, it isn't good enough anymore. The market kind of evolved to saying, hey, we've got this package with, let's say, Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace. It includes email security, but we need something else. And so the market said, well, okay, let's try and do this thing called post-delivery protection, where we can bolt a product onto behind that technology and start looking at emails after they've arrived in inboxes and trying to work out what's good and bad. But very quickly, I think the market evolved again and said, hey, actually, that's still a problem, because that's actually too late. If you think about that, like if I want to send you an email and get you to click on a link and give up your details through credential phishing or whatever, if that email's hit your inbox, I don't know, I feel like you're like an inbox zero kind of character, right? If it pops up, you click on it, you're there, right? And that's how people work. And so just relying on this post-delivery protection becomes a bit of an issue. And I think, that was kind of brought out in sort of some of the stats recently. I think it was, again, in the same Verizon report. They said that within 60 seconds, if you're likely to engage with a phish, you're likely to have done everything, like given up your account details within 60 seconds of it arriving in your inbox. Yeah. And then, in fact, our own research, we see that like 1 in 7 malicious URLs that land in the inbox get clicked within 60 seconds as well. And so
maybe that's why they disabled links. I can't press a link on my phone, at least.
That's probably one of the reasons. Yeah, and organizations look to do that in a different way. I mean, some companies will just completely disable them. Some will put into isolation. Some will build in click time protection. But interestingly, that then becomes a real key part of your overall, I guess, email security package, if you like. So you start off with actually saying, we can't just let the bad stuff arrive in the inbox anymore and deal with it there. We now need to focus on what pre-delivery is. Let's keep more bad stuff away in the first place. In other words, let's do a better job than that kind of good enough protection that we thought was good enough that's packaged in those productivity suites that we use. Let's put something up front that says, actually, stop all the bad stuff there. Then let's do something post-delivery, just in case, but equally gives us the capability to remediate if something bad goes in. But we also need to build in click time protection for exactly the reason that you said, because you click on things on your phone, because you click on things on your laptop, you click on things, it's just our nature, it's what we do. So, and I think, going back to your original point, how's the market evolved? And that's how it has evolved. It's evolved from just being, one piece of technology to actually now being multiple stages of pre-delivery, post-delivery, click time protection, which covers the suite, I guess, if you like, and gives us that platform to protect your people, because that's what we're in the business of. It's not email security anymore; it's people protection.
Layered defense.
Yeah,
cool. I know for a fact that one of my friends, I asked him like, "Hey, what would you do if you didn't work in mnemonic?" And he was like, "Probably like a researcher, maybe somebody like Proofpoint." And I was like, okay, wow. So they must be really good at what they do.
Nice.
One of my colleagues here in mnemonic that said that.
Okay. LinkedIn connection, please. LinkedIn.
Yeah. No, you cannot have him. No. He's awesome. No, but that made me think, like, obviously they're good at threat intelligence, right? And I know that obviously if, you must be collecting huge amounts of data.
Yeah.
Just a few words. I don't even know how to phrase the question, but like threat intelligence for Proofpoint, what does that mean?
Yeah, it means everything, actually. We see billions of emails every single day. I mean, the volume of business to business and business to consumer emails that we see on a daily basis is astonishingly huge. But that gives us all of that intelligence, right? So a lot of our technology does also get put into some of the ISPs and some of the big platforms out there as well, in various different ways. And it is that breadth of visibility, the volume of messages that we see. And then what we do with that is you learn. You don't just learn, hey, that's a bad IP address sending out a load of spam. Yeah, that's one of the things that you can learn. But more importantly, you can start to learn behaviors and profiles, and you start to understand, for example, there's a really, really good example just recently, actually, of an account of an organization that was a retail company that sold essentially chairs, tables, chairs, that type of thing. And in order to sell them, they had to deal with a company that made them, right? The manufacturing company, really small industry, kind of, 5-10 people, something along those sorts, that sort of size, made the furniture, gave it to the retailer sold it. Once a month, someone in the furniture manufacturer sends an invoice to the retailer and says, hey, you need to pay the bill for the chairs. That happens. Someone in the manufacturer's account gets compromised, right? They got done with a phishing attack. The account was taken over. And the sort of behaviors that you see right now is you see like a cyber criminal is basically just going to sit there and look at the inbox. In fact, look at the outbox and look at the conversation threads and realize that once a month they send invoices. And so when that thread happens, they jump on it and they hit reply all, and it goes back through, right? And so at that point, the attacker's actually sending emails as if it were directly from that account. And so you're expecting it. Everyone's comfortable with the conversation. It's completely normal. The only thing that's not normal is the attacker's actually saying in the message, hey, the bank account number's changed because we're having an audit at the moment. Can you send the money here instead? Now, if you look more closely, what they've also done is perhaps set the reply to address to be a domain externally, so that when the reply comes in, that conversation now happens to an external domain and it's not on the internal systems, and it therefore evades detection. But what's happening there is an account compromise has led to what we call a business email compromise scam. Basically, you've lost a load of money, right? Your money's been sent to the wrong place. That's the type of challenge that people are dealing with. Now, how do you spot that becomes the real challenge for organizations, because the message itself looks normal. There's nothing different about it other than the bank account number changed. And so a lot of what we're doing is around that intelligence piece and understanding context to say, yeah, Matt and Rob email on a regular basis, and yeah, occasionally they'll talk about invoices, and yeah, actually, sometimes those numbers change, but this level of urgency being applied by Matt is unusual. And so maybe we'll put a little banner across your top of your message and say, hey, just pay a little bit more attention to this, because this is maybe a little bit unusual. You need to just look into the details. Or, maybe it turns out that actually we detect that Matt's account has been compromised from that point. We make that decision and say it really does look like it's been compromised. But now when Matt starts to try and email that other retailer, the competitive retailer that they've also got business with, they've already had a warning in advance. And so that they can almost see that actually that threat's going to come through. And so that they can take action to block it straight away. So I guess the point is there's never ever just one thing. But what we're doing right now and what that intelligence gives us is the understanding of content and context to be able to make those decisions around those social engineering threats.
And I would assume that to be able to build that, you're doing like natural language processing. You're looking at like you're using machine learning to like break down the sentence itself and say urgency, looking at all the different factors, and those together make a banner come up. Or
yeah. So you said
like that,
you
right?
said you weren't going to talk about AI, but yes, that is because that is exactly it, right? Yeah, it is. It's using essentially machine learning models. I mean, machine learning has been working within email security platforms for a long time already. But what the benefits we've got right now is that we can take some of those large language models that, because they're much more freely available, and we work quite extensively with a few of them, and we build some of our own and use others as well. That helps us understand that context a bit better. That helps us, work out, what is the intent here? Is this conversation typical? Can we get those indicators from it? And so, yeah, absolutely. That helps us do that at scale. And again, the big difference for us is that we're now able to sit in line and do that pre-delivery. And so if we can make these decisions actually are based on content and context as the email's coming through, then all of a sudden now we can stop a vast majority of these types of threats actually landing in the inbox. And so where the market, previously had evolved to saying, hey, we need this post-delivery thing looking at just for these business email compromise emails, actually, that's not good enough. Now we're doing that, if I use a marketing term, at wire speed on pre-delivery, right? As the messages are coming through. And that's kind of huge because, yeah, that's I guess what the advances in AI have meant to us at Proofpoint, definitely.
Cool. So do you have lockdown mode on your phone? Assuming you have an iPhone?
No, I don't actually.
Okay, so one of the things about lockdown mode, if Apple sees something new, they have so much control over their telemetry. Like, oh, that's new, block it, or it goes to their like super SOC or their IR team, right?
Yeah.
Does Proofpoint have something like that in place for emails? Like stuff that you've never seen this, and I guess back to the AI machine learning discussion. But,
well, it kind of is, yeah. And actually, one of the best sources of telemetry is actually all the bad emails that we're seeing, right? They're hitting your organization, because that can tell us like who's targeting your organization, right? Which criminal gangs are kind of after you at the minute? What are the type of scams that we're seeing? What are the objectives? Are you facing ransomware threats? Is it business email compromise? But also it tells us who it's going to, and we can now say, hey, Robby is currently being targeted by a number of different criminal gangs with business email compromise threats, because they've worked out that actually he's not a salesperson like he said he was. He works in finance. He's got access to money. He's got access to money. He's got privilege. And so we're going to target him with those scams. Now, of course, we can start to see that through the intelligence. And based on that, we can almost grade and score all the bad stuff that we're seeing and blocking, and say, actually, that now gives us an indication to say, actually, Robby is one of our very attacked people within the organization. And very attacked doesn't necessarily mean just volume. It doesn't mean that, hey, you're getting tons of rubbish coming your way. It means tons of that really unique stuff as well. If we see that, or maybe just that one threat that was completely unique, we'd never seen it before. And so all of a sudden your very attacked people score rate goes up. The algorithm says, hey, you're now kind of pretty high at the top of the list. And what you've got there then is a list of essentially where your risk lies within the organization. Because underneath that, we can also take a view as to, do you have access to money? Do you have access to data? What's your privilege look like? Are you an admin? Those types of things. If we can factor that into the algorithm, and now we can say, okay, they're vulnerable, they're being attacked, and they've got privileged. That is risk. That's where we can kind of then center that risk in an organization. And in fact, we've got this super cool thing called the Nexus People Risk Explorer, which is a rubbish name, but it's an awesome tool because it's a Venn diagram of risk, and it shows those people that essentially present the most risk for the organization right now, right in the middle. And you can then apply better controls over that. So you talked about lockdown mode on your phone. One of those controls could be, hey, you're in the VAP list. Well, we're going to now tell your authentication gateway that who's in that list automatically. And so that you might be required to re-authenticate a couple of extra times during the day when you're logging into various different websites rather than using cached credentials. Or maybe we apply that to isolation. You talked about links on your phone. Anyone in that VAP list, well, any link that gets sent to them right now, we're going to isolate that. So they've got click time protection on everything. Or perhaps we'll force all of their web traffic through isolation. And that's just examples of some of the controls that you can kind of do, because that actually it opens the door to pretty much anything, because that information, we can offer it up through APIs, and we can then hook that into your other reporting tools within your security ecosystem to say, yeah, here's where we think most of your risk is right now at this moment on this day at this time, and it's always there and it's available for you, and you can then utilize that how you need to. So yeah, those lockdown kind of, we call them adaptive controls, I guess, is kind of what we refer to them, because it's dynamic, because the risk profile of the organization is always changing.
Very interesting. Tell me more about the very attacked people. I would assume, like you said, finance, developers, I would also assume.
Yeah.
I would also assume salespeople, just because we're just clicking on shit.
True. True. I mean, quite often you tend to see a lot of VIPs in there, right? The important people in the company, the execs. More often than not, because their name is out there, right? And everybody knows they've got privilege and stuff like that. So they'll tend to float up there. But you'll see a lot of finance in there. You often will see a lot of HR in there as well. HR dealing with people information, right? A good source of data that criminals are kind of after. But as I say, it's quite dynamic, and you'd be surprised how much it can change on a fairly regular basis. But once you factor in things like vulnerability and privilege as well, it does add a little bit of stability to that list, because you then need to know where to target your training. For example, another one of those adaptive controls might be, hey, let's, salespeople are always clickers. Let's make sure that we keep them up to date with their awareness training, that we feed them those little snippets every now and again just to keep their knowledge levels up and their awareness levels up. So, yeah, and VAPs is it's an interesting concept. These are people that we currently think are imminent targets within our business. And this is what we're doing about them. And these are the controls that we're putting in place. And it can be really powerful to help optimize the risk within an organization.
I got an email from my, probably shouldn't be saying this, but I'm saying anyway. I got an email from my salary department, and they were like, this can't be you, right? And smiley face. And it was like, obviously it was from the super shady Gmail, but it was written in perfect Norwegian, and it was asking my salary colleague to change my account number for my salary, right? Yep. And she laughed because she was like, it was written in Norwegian. That's obviously not you. Perfect Norwegian. So I was like, ow. But yes, that's not me,
The good thing about that is your colleague, immediately thought, yeah, this is not right. But if you think about that from an attacker's perspective, if they can scale that, that's worth quite a lot of money. And again, those types of scams, those gift carding type scams are incredibly annoying, but incredibly popular as well at the moment.
So the $1 million question, I think one that everybody in this podcast would appreciate hearing is like, why doesn't Microsoft just get their shit together and do what you're doing on their side, since they are like the default choice included in the package, right?
Yeah.
And I know that Microsoft has a big threat intelligence team that does a lot of the similar work that you guys are doing, right?
Of course.
So why does Proofpoint exist?
Yeah.
I don't mean that in a negative way.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think... I'll answer the question with a question. Why doesn't Microsoft get their shit together? Absolutely. I mean, I like it that they don't, because actually it means that there's an ecosystem that can kind of focus on doing the right thing with protecting people, and is not necessarily just focused on building that productivity suite. And I think that's kind of that's the balance. Is you've got I'm using it right now, right? Office 365, using it every single day, and it's awesome to a certain degree.
Yeah.
And there are things we don't all like in there, but there are things we love, right? It works. It's ubiquitous. Now, it's ubiquitous. So there are things in there, like imagine I stick a file on OneDrive and I decide, hey, Robby, I need to send you the PowerPoint presentation. I'll just share it with you on OneDrive. That's fine. You get the link that kind of comes through. There used to be a time in cybersecurity where, you'd basically tell people, when you get an email, hover over that link. And if it looks legit, okay, click on it. If it looks a bit dodgy, don't do that. You can't do that with OneDrive or a SharePoint link or anything like that these days, because there's these massive, great big long links, and they're really hard to understand. Of course, attackers know that. Attackers know that we're all using Office 365. They know it's ubiquitous. So what do? Well, they abuse those technologies as well. They actually launch their campaigns. They'll stand up a 365 tenant. They'll share malicious files in OneDrive. They'll use the tools that we're using against us. And of course, that then becomes incredibly hard for someone like Microsoft to be able to defend against, because essentially the attackers are using their own platform to attack people on their own platform. And so you get to a point where you actually need to look at security slightly differently and say, actually, are they best placed in order to defend our people? And the answer for most organizations is often no. Because actually there's huge value to be had in that everything that we talked about. And, it's not just email security as being one product anymore. It's pre-delivery, it's post-delivery, it's click time protection. It's that complete story. Is also security awareness training. It is also how we integrate with all those other pieces of technology in your security stack. It's all of that now becomes, effectively email security is now a platform, if you like, rather than one piece of technology. And that's something that, organizations like Microsoft that are building those suites, they don't necessarily get that. And I think that's part of the reason why they do a good enough job to keep bad enough stuff away. Okay. That's, it's okay, but it's not stopping any of this, all the types of threats and things that we talked about. And organizations are not getting those values of understanding where their risk is and ultimately mitigating human risk with all of this under marketing terms. I said I'll try and pretend not to be a marketing person. We call it Human Centric Cybersecurity, because that's ultimately what it is, right? It's protecting people.
Yeah, they have this super complex environment now. And I guess if they were to get their shit together, Proofpoint would be struggling, CrowdStrike, all these other companies that we know and love would be.
But would they? I mean, I wrestle with this one, because I think about that and I think, actually, would they? If they really did, if they really, really did a really good job, are we as cybersecurity professionals happy to put all of our eggs in one basket and say, do you know what, Microsoft, to have everything and become now not only the platform that we use, but we're the platform that to protect the platform that we use. And I don't know. I think.
Okay. Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
I think that becomes a problem.
But we both can agree that people are gravitating towards a platform play now.
100%. Yeah, no, 100%.
But then your point stands even more importantly that you should use something else to secure if you're putting everything in the platform.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you're a salesperson, right? You understand that at the minute people are looking at consolidation. They're saying, actually, can I reduce the number of vendors that I work with and get actually these larger platforms in order to protect my organization? And to a certain degree, we see a lot of that happening with, I guess, SASE is kind of one industry where that's kind of happened, where zero trust is kind of combined into SASE, and people are looking at, hey, have I got one platform play there? Maybe on EDR, you mentioned CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, and all those other good vendors that are doing some great stuff on the endpoint. That's almost a platform play there as well, from an EDR or managed detection response, XDR type stuff. And then you've got what we've just described as human centric cybersecurity as well. And I think that's the third platform.
They say identity is a new perimeter. How does identity have relation to human centric security?
It comes in a number of ways. So one is account takeover. Account takeover is a real problem. The biggest source, I guess, of account takeover is usually credential phishing. We see things like multi-factor authentication phishing kits being used, where we all thought that token would prevent people taking our account over, but actually it doesn't. When we see some of these reverse proxy phishing attacks, we're actually logging into the main websites and they're just stealing our session tokens and taking our accounts on from there. So that's a problem. And so again, with our technology, what we're also doing is hooking in via APIs into Microsoft and actually working out, say, piecing it all together. Say phishing came in, we know Matt clicked on phishing link. After Matt clicked on phishing link, a rule was set up in Outlook that says redirect emails to this place or something along those lines, or maybe a login happened from this particular site, or even another one, a third-party or application. Those plugins to Outlook that we love to use, like to schedule a meeting or to book a Zoom or whatever it happens to be. When those accounts, we see those apps kind of getting compromised, then actually have permissions to the accounts as well. So being able to monitor that all forms part of the human-centric story, because we need to control identity.
And identity's at the center. Yeah.
And identity's at the center. And it actually then goes beyond that as well, because if you get to the point where, all right, my account's got compromised, I've got a small problem, we now need to stop that small problem becoming a much bigger problem. And the attacker ultimately is going to look to try and escalate privileges on the device, move laterally within the organization, before it then moves on to data, because it then finally gets into data loss. And data loss also forms part of that whole human-centric piece as well.
I want to come back to data loss. I had a colleague, he told me that I had to ask you about, so I keep forgetting what it was. It's probably because I don't understand it, but it's DMARC, DKIM, SPF, these things. What's happening in the world right now that makes those important?
Okay, so these are email authentication standards, right? And what they allow us to do is to say, okay, that email that we've just received, it came from a place that we know it should have come from. In other words, this isn't somebody trying to spoof and trying to send emails on our behalf from a domain. Is that a valid sender? Has it come from a valid host? We can check all of those things before we let that message appear in your inbox.
If those standards are in use.
If those standards are in use and applied correctly, yes, because that's another big part of it. And they've been about for a little while, actually, and to the point where a lot of governments actually around the world, and kind of national security and cybersecurity agencies in governments, turned around and said, hey, all our government departments, you have to be doing this. And some countries took that on board and some countries didn't. Like Denmark, for example, did an awesome job.
I was just going to say Denmark did that, yeah.
They did. I think it was like 2020, maybe even slightly before that, they came out and said, hey, government institutions, you need to actually start enforcing this, because we want to take advantage of that. And what it does, it basically, it prevents people from spoofing domains. It prevents emails looking like they've come from somewhere that they haven't. And so that's a cool thing. The problem was industry didn't really adopt that very much. It didn't massively take off. And I was
Is it complicated or something? What's up with that?
Yeah, it can be there's a perception of risk around it, right? If you're a big business and you send emails, the last thing you want to do is break email. Because if you break email, that's a problem, right? Your phone is going to ring. That's an impact to the business. And so, that is kind of a bit of a headache. And, in fact, we did some analysis back in January that looked at the Forbes Global 2000, right? So largest 2,000 organizations around the world. Only, I think it was more than one quarter of the Global 2000, they ultimately hadn't deployed DMARC to the right levels. And so that was disappointing. And so what happened was Google and Yahoo at the same time, and also Apple, although they did it kind of quietly, came out with an announcement that said, if you're going to send emails to people on our platforms, if you're going to send lots of emails to people on our platforms, you need to be using DMARC. You need to be authenticating your emails properly. They said a few other things as well around that. And that gave a huge amount of organizations a kick up the backside to say, we need to deploy it. And so there was this big rush to try and get it done. I think it was before April, before those platforms turned around and said, we're going to start rejecting emails at that point. And of course, if you think about it, if it's on Google, if it's on Yahoo, if it's on Apple, it's consumer. So it's really business to consumer type companies that we're talking about here. But they had to do it, and they did, right? Which is great. That was really, really good. Now, the knock-on impact has been now these companies can stand up and say, hey, we've done this authentication piece in our business-to-business conversations. We now want you to do that authentication piece. Because when you send me those emails with those invoices for those pieces of wooden furniture for me as the retailer to send, I want to be sure that those emails are coming from your systems and they're not coming from anybody else. And so what we're starting to see now is organizations in their kind of supply and procurement contracts actually saying, you need to do email authentication. And so we're at a point where email authentication and DMARC specifically has become not just a nice to have, it's become an essential part of kind of doing business. And so that's the perceived problem. It's not a problem, but it is a perceived problem. It gives us that intelligence, and ultimately it then feeds our overall picture as to what risk looks like for the business. Because now in that same place of where you see all your people risk, you can actually see all the risk that's associated with your brand as well. Who's spoofing your brand out to the outside world, and it gives you that great visibility into that as well. So if you haven't done it, do it. Definitely look at it. It's in some cases it's a zero cost thing. In other cases, you can work with companies like Proofpoint and others to help you do it without the risk, and it will make a huge difference to your risk profile. Not only just the messages that you're sending and the way your brand can be abused, but also how enforcing it on the inbound as well can make a big difference.
Who was that? I forgot who said it, but don't be a digital asshole. Fix your DMARC.
Yeah, and we talk in security about doing the basics, right? We always talk about that. Like people say, do the basics. Just make sure you're keeping your patches up to date. Patching those vulnerabilities. Make sure you've got a firewall running. Just do all those basic things. I kind of feel like email authentication is one of those basics now. Yeah, just don't be a doofus. Do DMARC.
Right. Architecture recommendations that you typically give your clients. What does that look like these days?
I think the vast majority of clients that we talk to, most of them are probably using Office 365, unless they've got some kind of reason that they can't, that maybe they're running their own mail servers on premise or whatever it happens to be for what, confidentiality, jurisdiction, whatever that happens to be. What we tend to talk about when we're talking about architecture is we talk that overall story of that pre-delivery, basically the journey of an email, right? It's like what happens before it comes in, what happens once it's in, what happens when it's been sat on their inbox and someone's interacted with it. So that pre-delivery, post-delivery click time. And so for us, when we talk about email security as a platform, we do talk about those kind of 3 steps and making sure that you've got all those 3 steps covered in your security architecture rather than just one of them, which seems to be the most popular, with a lot of organizations, which is that they just rely on post-delivery, which is, for those reasons we talked about earlier, that people interact too quickly with emails, seems mad. So definitely, that thinking about the journey, the life cycle of an email and making sure that you're covering all the bases is kind of key in that architecture flow, I guess.
All right, so we've talked about AI, threat intelligence. Combine those two. What's the future of email security look like? I would assume it's something to do with those two.
Yeah, I think you're right. We don't know how the attack's going to evolve. But we've kind of got a good feel for what those techniques look like. We also know that actually probably the hardest attacks to stop are the ones that are just the words. If it's something malicious in there, it's easy. say it's easy, but we can find it. So we need to work out how attackers are getting creative, and we need to stay ahead of that. But we also need to think about what happens after the fact. What happens after bang, and often it's around data loss. And so I think we talked about email security as a platform. We talked about Human Centric Security ultimately being that platform. Data loss forms a big part of that, and I think that's a lot of where the future is going. And actually, does Matt regularly email Robby? And if I was maybe do I regularly email you invoices? Do I regularly email you attachments with lots of customer information in? Did I try and send you that email by mistake? Because we have all done this thing where you've tried to send an email to Matt, you've typed Matt in, and it ended up going to the different Matt, the wrong Matt. That happens all the time. Or you put the wrong attachment on the email and you send the whole file instead of the subset of the data that you wanted to share. And so where that falls now under the banner of email security. And so this technology that we have now, this AI technology, is ultimately picking that up and say, actually, did you mean to send that to Matt? Because normally you send it to the other Matt, and maybe you should just change that.
So they'll stop it at one, yeah.
Exactly. And so we stop it when you send it. It kind of doesn't happen, because it's a problem for everyone. We've all done that misdirected email. And in fact, here in the UK, we have the Information Commissioner's Office, right? So if anyone has a data breach or anything like that, they have to report it to the Information Commissioner. That's the kind of setup here. And they put a report together every quarter that says, how do people lose data? And every quarter at the top of the list is misdirected email. It's again, it goes back to being a human problem. It goes back to being a human-centric problem. It's us. It's not a problem. It's just way the technology's built. It allows us to send things to the wrong place. It shouldn't do that. And this is an area that we're addressing now within the platform, is this misdirected email. And also what that has the added benefit of is, hey, Robby, you're leaving the company right now. You've just emailed the company's contact database out to your Gmail account. Being able to stop those types of exfils as well. All of that is kind of built into AI. It's running on the endpoint, and just get these nice little pop-ups that just say, did you really mean to do that? And that helps us kind of understand that overall picture and protect against the simplest and most common form of data loss, which is misdirected email.
Mr. Cooke, do you have any closing thoughts?
I would just implore people to take a look, just to rethink email security. It isn't one piece of technology anymore. It is human-centric security, and to actually almost use human-centric as the lens that they look through when they're examining their security operation.
Well, Human-Centric Security. Talk to Proofpoint.
Awesome.
And mnemonic, hopefully. Thank you so much, Mr. Cooke.
Cool. Thank you, sir.
Have a great summer, and we'll talk soon.
Awesome. Thank you.